Good evening. Welcome in. Tonight, we are going to spend some quiet time together, learning about something you use every single day. Something so woven into the rhythm of modern life that you probably stopped thinking about it years ago. We are going to talk about Wi-Fi, not in any rushed or technical way, just gently from the very beginning. The way you might explain it to a friend on a long, unhurried evening when neither of you has anywhere else to be. And before we go any further, a small question for you. Are you listening to relax, to study, or to fall asleep tonight? There is no right answer. Just notice it quietly for yourself. There is nothing you need to do right now, nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to take notes on. If you drift off at any point, that is perfectly fine. The information will still be here whenever you want it. For now, just settle in. Let your shoulders relax, let the pillow do its work, and let the quiet hum of how wireless signals work carry you along at whatever pace feels right. Here is what we will wander through tonight. First, we will talk about radio waves themselves, what they are, and how they move through the world around you. We will take our time with this, because everything that follows rests on it, and it is simpler than you might expect. Then we will look at the devices that send and receive those waves, the routers and the adapters, and how they manage to speak the same language despite being made by different companies, in different factories, in different parts of the world. After that, we will explore the idea of channels and frequencies, the way Wi-Fi carves out little lanes for itself in the invisible spectrum all around us. We will talk about how your data is packaged up and sent through the air, piece by piece, in a way that is remarkably orderly and calm. Then we will spend some time understanding how Wi-Fi keeps your information safe with encryption, a topic that sounds complicated, but is really just a matter of gentle mathematics. After that, we will look at why Wi-Fi sometimes slows down or drops out entirely, and you will find that the reasons are all very ordinary. We will trace the quiet history of how Wi-Fi standards have evolved over the decades, and we will close with a gentle look at where Wi-Fi sits in the broader landscape of wireless technology, and how it has become the invisible companion to so much of daily life, connecting billions of devices around the world without ever raising its voice. None of it is complicated. None of it is urgent. None of it requires you to be alert or focused. All of it is rather lovely in its own understated way. And if at any point your eyes grow heavy and the words begin to blend together, that is not a failure. That is exactly what this evening is for. Let us begin.
Section 1. What radio waves are.
To understand Wi-Fi, you first need to understand something very simple about the physical world. All around you, right now, there are waves. Not water waves, though the idea is similar. These are electromagnetic waves, ripples in the electric and magnetic fields that fill every corner of the universe. Light is one kind of electromagnetic wave, the kind your eyes happen to be sensitive to. The warmth you feel from a sunbeam is another kind, infrared radiation. And radio waves are yet another, with a longer, slower rhythm than visible light, stretching out in gentle undulations that can span meters or even kilometers from one crest to the next. Imagine dropping a small stone into a perfectly still pond on a windless morning. The ripples spread outward in every direction, smooth and predictable, one after another. Each ripple has a certain distance between it and the next one. That distance is what we call the wavelength, and the number of ripples that pass a given point in 1 second, that is the frequency. A short wavelength means the ripples are close together and the frequency is high. A long wavelength means they are farther apart and the frequency is lower. Radio waves work in much the same way, except instead of water, the ripples are happening in the electromagnetic field itself, which is not a substance you can touch or see, but a property of the universe that exists everywhere, in every direction, even in the emptiest reaches of outer space. These waves spread outward from their source, and they carry energy, and, most importantly for our purposes tonight, they can carry information. The key thing about radio waves is that they travel at the speed of light, because, in a real and literal sense, they are light. They are simply a version of light that your eyes cannot detect. Visible light, the kind that lets you see the room around you, occupies a very narrow slice of the electromagnetic spectrum. Radio waves occupy a much broader slice, at much lower frequencies. But they are made of exactly the same stuff. They follow the same rules, and they travel at exactly the same speed, roughly 300 million meters per second. At that speed, a radio wave can cross your living room in about the time it takes you to blink, though that comparison understates it considerably. It is far faster than a blink. But the point is that the journey is essentially instantaneous from your perspective, and that is what makes wireless communication feel so effortless. Radio waves pass through walls, through clothing, through the air in your room right now. They are not blocked by most everyday materials, though some things slow them down or absorb a little of their energy as they pass. A thick concrete wall, for instance, will weaken a radio signal more than a thin wooden door. A sheet of metal will reflect most of the signal entirely. But in general, radio waves are remarkably good at getting from one place to another without anyone noticing them at all. They are discreet travelers, slipping through the world without disturbing anything they pass through. Now, the radio spectrum, which is the full range of radio wave frequencies available, is enormous. It stretches from waves that oscillate just a few times per second, with wavelengths longer than a football field, all the way up to waves that oscillate billions of times per second, with wavelengths measured in centimeters. Different parts of this vast spectrum are used for different things. AM radio stations use one part, broadcasting at frequencies in the hundreds of kilohertz. FM stations use another part, up in the tens of megahertz. Television broadcasts occupy their own bands. Air traffic control has its own. Baby monitors, garage door openers, walkie-talkies, weather satellites. All of these use their own little slices of the radio spectrum, allocated and regulated so that everyone's signals stay out of everyone else's way, at least in theory. And Wi-Fi uses a few specific slices as well. It is worth pausing for a moment to appreciate how neatly this is all arranged. The radio spectrum is a shared resource, a commons of the invisible air, and it is managed with care so that different technologies can coexist without stepping on each other's signals. The slices allocated to Wi-Fi are in the parts of the spectrum that do not require a license to use, which is why you did not need to fill out any paperwork or ask anyone's permission to set up a router in your home. These are sometimes called the ISM bands, which stands for Industrial, Scientific, and Medical, because they were originally set aside for those purposes. Wi-Fi borrows them, and it does so very politely. Take a slow breath. If your mind wants to chase the details, you can let it. For now, it is enough to remember that Wi-Fi simply borrows a small, orderly slice of the radio spectrum. The most common Wi-Fi frequencies are the bands around 2.4 GHz and 5 GHz. A gigahertz means 1 billion cycles per second. That is how many times the wave oscillates, how many ripples pass a given point each second. It sounds like a lot, and it is, but it is simply the natural rhythm at which these particular waves vibrate. It is no more dramatic than the fact that a particular musical note vibrates at a particular frequency. It is just the pitch of the wave, so to speak. 2.4 gigahertz waves have a slightly longer wavelength, about 12.5 centimeters from crest to crest. This means they are a bit better at passing through walls and reaching distant corners of a building. They bend around obstacles a little more readily, and they maintain their strength over longer distances. 5 gigahertz waves are shorter, about 6 centimeters, and faster in a sense, which gives them the ability to carry more data at once. But they do not travel quite as far or penetrate solid objects quite as well. This is a gentle trade-off that sits at the heart of how Wi-Fi works. And it is a trade-off you experience every time you notice that your connection is faster in one room than another. We will come back to this idea later. Let that comparison settle. Longer waves tend to travel a bit farther. Shorter waves tend to carry a bit more at once. Wi-Fi just chooses a few of these options and switches between them as needed. For now, the thing to hold on to is simply this. Wi-Fi is just a conversation carried on radio waves. Your router speaks, your phone listens, and then your phone speaks back. The waves travel through the air between them, invisible, silent, and constant, like a quiet dialogue happening just beneath the surface of your room, in a language you cannot hear, but that your devices understand perfectly. So, that is what radio waves are. Gentle ripples in the electromagnetic field, traveling at the speed of light, passing through the walls around you, carrying information from one device to another. Nothing more dramatic than that. Nothing louder than silence.
Section 2. The router and your device. Now that we have a sense of what radio waves are and how they move through the world, let us look at the two main characters in any Wi-Fi story, the router and the device. The device is whatever you are using to connect: a phone, a laptop, a tablet, a smart speaker, a television, or any of the many gadgets that have quietly become part of your daily routine. The router is the box that sits somewhere in your home or office, often on a shelf or mounted on a wall, blinking quietly with a few small lights, doing its job without much fanfare. The router has two fundamental responsibilities. The first is to connect to the wider internet. This usually happens through a cable that comes in from outside, from your internet service provider. It might be a coaxial cable, the same kind that used to carry cable television. It might be a fiber optic cable, a thin strand of glass that carries data as pulses of light. Or it might be a phone line, carrying a digital signal alongside the old analog voice frequencies. Whatever the type of cable, its job is the same: to bring the internet into your home through a physical, wired connection. But the internet arrives through that wire, and most of your devices are not connected to that wire. You are not going to run a cable to your phone as you walk from room to room. And that is where the router's second job comes in. It takes the data flowing through that wired connection and broadcasts it wirelessly, using those radio waves we just discussed, so that your devices can receive it from anywhere within range, without being plugged into anything at all. The router is, in essence, a translator. It takes information from the wired world and puts it into the wireless world, and then it does the reverse for anything your devices send back. Inside the router, there is a small radio transmitter and a small radio receiver. In fact, there are often several of each, tuned to different frequencies. Some handle the 2.4 gigahertz band, Others handle the 5 GHz band. And in newer routers, some handle the 6 GHz band as well. The transmitter converts digital data, the ones and zeros that make up everything on the internet, into radio wave patterns. It does this through a process called modulation, which is a gentle word that means it changes certain properties of the wave, its amplitude, its frequency, or its phase, in precise ways that encode the data into the shape of the wave itself. Think of it like a lamp that blinks in a pattern. If you and a friend agree beforehand that a long blink means one thing and a short blink means another, you can send messages back and forth using nothing but light. Radio modulation works on exactly the same principle, just with electromagnetic waves instead of visible light, and at speeds that are, honestly, rather soothing to contemplate. The wave goes out, carrying its encoded message, and the receiver on the other end knows how to read the pattern and turn it back into data. There are several different modulation schemes that Wi-Fi uses, and they have become more sophisticated with each generation of the technology. The details are not something you need to carry with you, but the general idea is always the same. The transmitter changes the wave in a structured, predictable way, and the receiver knows exactly what to look for. It is a shared language, agreed upon in advance, so that both sides of the conversation understand each other perfectly. The more advanced the modulation scheme, the more data can be packed into each wave. Like a conversation between two people who have developed such a rich shorthand over the years that a single word can convey an entire paragraph of meaning. Your device, on its end, has its own small radio receiver and transmitter, usually built into a tiny chip no bigger than your fingernail. This chip is tucked away inside the device, connected to a small antenna, and it does the same job as the router's radio, just in the other direction. When the router sends out radio waves carrying data, your device's receiver picks up those waves, interprets the modulation patterns, and converts them back into digital data. The web page you requested, the song you are streaming, the message you are waiting for. When your device wants to send something back, say a request for a web page or a message you have typed, it uses its own transmitter to send radio waves back to the router, which then passes the data along through the wired connection and out into the wider internet. This back and forth happens continuously, millions of times per second, and yet it is entirely silent. There are no moving parts. There are no sparks or flashes, just radio waves, traveling at the speed of light, crossing the small distance between your router and your device in a fraction of a microsecond. It is one of those marvels of engineering that is invisible precisely because it works so well. There is one more thing worth spending a moment on. When you first connect a device to a Wi-Fi network, there is a brief introductory exchange, a kind of polite handshake between the device and the router. Your device detects the router's signal, which the router broadcasts at regular intervals, typically many times per second, like a lighthouse sweeping its beam steadily across the water. This broadcast is called a beacon frame, and it contains the router's network name, the one you see in your list of available networks when you open your Wi-Fi settings. Your device, upon seeing this beacon, says, in effect, "I would like to join your network." The router responds, "Certainly, but first, let us agree on a few ground rules." They negotiate some technical details, like which version of the Wi-Fi standard they both support, what speeds they can manage, and which encryption method they will use. Then, if a password is required, your device provides it, and the router checks it. If everything matches up, the connection is established, quietly and without ceremony, and the two can begin their ongoing conversation. From that point forward, they will continue to exchange packets of data, back and forth, as long as the connection holds. And if the connection drops for some reason, perhaps because you walked too far from the router, or because there was a momentary disruption, your device will typically reconnect on its own, repeating the handshake and picking up where it left off. So that is the router and the device. Two small radios talking to each other in modulated waves, translating between the wired internet and the wireless air of your home. One speaks, the other listens, and then they switch. A steady, patient exchange, happening right now in the air around you, invisible and calm and utterly reliable. Let us take a quiet moment here to gather ourselves. So far, we have covered two gentle ideas, and both of them are really quite simple. First, that radio waves are ripples in the electromagnetic field, invisible and everywhere, traveling at the speed of light, carrying information through the air without disturbing anything they pass through. Second, that your router and your device each have small radios inside them, and they use those radios to talk to each other, converting digital data into wave patterns and back again, over and over, patiently and silently, without any fuss at all. Imagine the room you are in right now. Perhaps there is a soft hum from an appliance somewhere, the refrigerator in the kitchen, the heating system in the walls, something distant and steady and barely noticeable. In that same air, right alongside those quiet sounds, Wi-Fi signals are passing through, carrying small parcels of data from one place to another. You cannot hear them, you cannot see them, you cannot feel them on your skin, but they are there, doing their work gently and faithfully, like letters being passed across a room without anyone speaking a word. Let that settle for a moment. There is no rush. The night is long, and the signals are patient. Section 3. Frequencies and channels. Now let us talk about something that sounds more complicated than it really is. Channels. When we say that Wi-Fi operates at 2.4 GHz or 5 GHz, we're describing a general neighborhood of the radio spectrum. But within each of those neighborhoods, there are specific lanes, and those lanes are called channels. Think of it like a wide, multi-lane road. All the cars on the road are heading in roughly the same direction, but each one stays in its own lane to keep things orderly and to avoid bumping into the others. If every car tried to occupy the same lane at the same time, things would get very slow very quickly. But spread across several lanes, the traffic flows smoothly, and everyone gets where they are going without too much delay. Wi-Fi channels work the same way. The 2.4 GHz band, which stretches from about 2.4 to 2.484 GHz, is divided into several channels. In the United States, there are 11 available channels. In many other countries, there are 13, and in a few places, 14. Each channel is centered on a slightly different frequency within the band, and each one is offset from the next by 5 MHz, which is 5 million cycles per second. Now, here is a small but important detail, and it is worth taking a moment to understand it, because it explains a lot about why Wi-Fi sometimes behaves the way it does. Each Wi-Fi channel does not use just 5 MHz of the spectrum. It actually uses about 20 MHz, sometimes more. This means that each channel's signal spills over into the space that the neighboring channels are trying to use. Channels that are right next to each other overlap significantly. It is like two people at adjacent tables in a cafe, each trying to have a quiet conversation. but sitting so close that their words blend together, and it becomes hard to follow either one clearly. Because of this overlap, there are really only 3 channels in the 2.4 GHz band that do not interfere with each other at all. Channels 1, 6, and 11. These 3 are spaced far enough apart that their signals stay neatly in their own lanes, with no blurring at the edges. If your router is on channel 1 and your neighbor's router is on channel 6, they will not bother each other. But if your router is on channel 1 and your neighbor's is on channel 2, the overlap between their signals will cause some interference, and both connections may suffer a little bit. Most routers today, if they are set to choose their channel automatically, will try to select one of these 3 non-overlapping channels, whichever one seems least crowded at the time. This is a quiet bit of intelligence built into the router's software, a small but helpful decision it makes on your behalf without ever mentioning it. A gentle pause. In the 2.4 GHz band, the practical takeaway is simple. 3 calm lanes, 1, 6, and 11, where signals can avoid stepping on each other. The 5 GHz band, by contrast, is much wider. It spans a much larger range of frequencies, and it has many more channels available. Because the channels in this band are spaced farther apart relative to their bandwidth, there is far less overlap and far less interference. This is one of the reasons that 5 GHz Wi-Fi often feels faster and more reliable, especially in busy environments. There are simply more clean lanes available for traffic, and fewer of them are bumping into each other. In recent years, a third band has also become available for Wi-Fi, the 6 GHz band. It is even wider still, offering a generous stretch of spectrum with many more channels and even less congestion. Devices and routers that support this newest band are becoming more common, and the experience of using it is much the same as using the older bands, just with more room to breathe, like moving from a 2-lane road to a 6-lane highway on a quiet Sunday morning. So why does your Wi-Fi slow down in certain situations? Often, it is because the channel your router is using has become crowded. In an apartment building, for example, there might be dozens of routers all operating in the 2.4 GHz band, many of them on the same channel or on overlapping channels. Each one is trying to have its own quiet conversation with its own devices, but the room, so to speak, is full of murmuring voices, and the signals interfere with one another, and everyone's connection gets a little slower as a result. Devices have to wait longer for their turn. Packets need to be resent more often. The experience degrades gracefully, but it degrades nonetheless. Your router is aware of this to some degree. Many modern routers will periodically scan the airwaves, assess which channels are busiest, and shift to a quieter one if one is available. This happens behind the scenes, without any action on your part. It is a gentle, automatic adjustment, like a person at a crowded gathering drifting slowly toward a quieter corner of the room when the noise becomes too much. Let us pause here and recap. Channels are simply specific lanes within the wider Wi-Fi frequency bands. In the 2.4 GHz band, channels overlap quite a bit, so only 3 of them, 1, 6, and 11, can be used simultaneously without interference. In the 5 and 6 GHz bands, there is much more room, and interference is less of a concern. Your router tries to find the best channel for the current conditions, quietly, automatically, without troubling you about it at all. That is all channels are. Gentle lanes for signals to travel in, keeping things orderly in the invisible air around you. Section 4. How data travels through the air.
Now we come to one of the loveliest parts of the Wi-Fi story: how your data actually moves from one device to another through nothing but air. It is not a continuous stream, the way water flows through a pipe or electricity flows through a wire. It is more like a series of small parcels, sent one after another, each one carefully wrapped and addressed and checked before the next one follows. In the world of networking, these small parcels are called packets. When you load a web page, or stream a piece of music, or send a message to a friend, the data involved is broken up into many small packets. Each packet contains a portion of the actual data, perhaps a fragment of an image or a few seconds of audio, along with some additional information that helps it find its way: where the packet came from, where it is going, what order it belongs in relative to the other packets, and a small mathematical check called a checksum that allows the receiver to verify that nothing was garbled during transmission. The reason data is sent in packets rather than as one big continuous block is deeply practical. If you sent all your data as a single unbroken stream and something went wrong partway through, a brief moment of interference, a collision with another signal, anything at all, you would have to send the entire thing again from the beginning. But with packets, if something goes wrong with just one packet, only that one small packet needs to be resent. All the other packets that arrived safely are fine. It is like mailing a long letter in several envelopes rather than one. If one envelope gets lost in the post, you only need to replace that single page, not the entire letter. The size of a Wi-Fi packet is not enormous. A typical packet might carry around 1,500 bytes of data, which is roughly 1,500 characters of text, or a tiny fraction of a photograph. A single web page might require hundreds of packets. A video stream might require thousands every second. But each one is a small, manageable, self-contained unit, and the system handles them with impressive calm and efficiency. You can let the numbers soften. The main idea is that Wi-Fi moves information in many small pieces, so nothing has to be perfect all at once. When your device wants to send a packet over Wi-Fi, it does not just transmit immediately. First, it listens. It listens to the channel it is using to see if anyone else is currently transmitting. This is because Wi-Fi is a shared medium, like a room where many people can speak, but only one person should speak at a time. If the channel is quiet, the device goes ahead and sends its packet. If the channel is busy, meaning another device is already transmitting, your device waits. It waits a brief, random amount of time, then listens again. If the channel is now clear, it sends. If not, it waits again, a little longer this time. This polite system is called a contention-based access protocol. In more technical language, it is known as CSMA-CA, which stands for Carrier Sense Multiple Access with Collision Avoidance. You do not need to remember the acronym, but you can think of it simply as good manners. No one shouts over anyone else. Everyone listens before speaking. Everyone waits for a pause in the conversation before contributing their own words. It is the kind of etiquette you might wish all conversations followed. Occasionally, despite everyone's best efforts, two devices will start transmitting at the same moment, because they both listened and both thought the channel was clear at the same instant. When this happens, the packets collide, and neither one arrives intact at the router. Both devices detect that their packets were not acknowledged, stop transmitting, wait a random amount of time, and then try again. Because the wait times are chosen randomly, they are unlikely to collide a second time, and even if they do,
The wait times grow longer with each subsequent collision, making further collisions progressively less likely. It is a simple, self-correcting system, and it works remarkably well in practice, handling thousands of these small negotiations every second without any central coordinator telling everyone when to speak. Each packet, once successfully sent, travels as a pattern of radio waves from the transmitter to the receiver. The journey takes only microseconds. The receiver decodes the modulation pattern, reassembles the digital data, checks the checksum to make sure nothing was corrupted in transit, and if everything looks correct, it sends back a tiny acknowledgement, a brief signal that says, in essence, "I received your packet and it looks fine." If the sender does not receive that acknowledgement within a very short window of time, usually just a few milliseconds, it assumes the packet was lost or damaged and sends it again. This back and forth, this quiet exchange of packets and acknowledgements, is happening continuously and rapidly whenever you are using Wi-Fi. Hundreds or thousands of packets per second, each one a small, orderly parcel of data, sent, received, confirmed, and followed immediately by the next. The cumulative effect is the smooth, seamless experience of browsing a website, watching a video, or listening to music. Even though, underneath, it is all happening in these tiny, discrete, perfectly organized steps. It is a bit like watching a river from a distance. The river looks like a single, continuous flow of water, smooth and unbroken. But if you could see it at the smallest scale, you would find that it is made up of individual molecules of water, each one moving on its own, bumping into the ones around it, finding its own path downstream. The overall effect is seamless, but the underlying reality is granular. Wi-Fi data works the same way. What feels like a continuous stream is actually millions of small, individual packets, each one taking its own brief journey through the air, each one accounted for, each one contributing to the larger flow. There is something quietly satisfying about this. The data does not need to travel all at once. It does not need a dedicated, unbroken path. It simply moves in small, careful pieces, each one finding its way through the air at the speed of light, each one checked and confirmed on arrival. The whole process as orderly and dependable as a well-run post office, where every letter is accounted for and nothing goes missing. So that is how data travels over Wi-Fi. In packets, small and orderly, sent one at a time through the air, with polite turn-taking and quiet confirmations. Nothing dramatic, nothing chaotic. Just a steady, dependable exchange, happening in the air around you right now. Let us rest here for a moment and gather what we have learned so far. We began with radio waves, those gentle ripples in the electromagnetic field that carry Wi-Fi signals through the air at the speed of light. We met the router and the device, each with its own small radio, talking back and forth in a language of modulated waves that we cannot hear, but that works perfectly nonetheless. We explored channels, the carefully arranged lanes that keep different Wi-Fi conversations from tangling with one another. And just now, we saw how data is broken into small packets, sent politely, one at a time, each one checked and confirmed before the next one follows. Picture a quiet night, the kind where the world seems to have taken a deep breath and decided to hold still for a while. The kind where you can hear the small sounds of the house settling, the soft ticking of a clock somewhere in another room, the distant and barely audible murmur of the world outside your window. In that stillness, Wi-Fi signals are moving through the room, carrying their little packets of data with perfect patience and perfect regularity, asking nothing of you, expecting nothing in return. Just doing their quiet work, the way good systems always do, steadily and without complaint. Take a breath, let it out slowly. There is still more to explore, but none of it is going anywhere. None of it is urgent. It will wait for you. Section 5. How Wi-Fi keeps your data safe. Now let us turn to something that many people wonder about, but few ever examine closely. How Wi-Fi protects the information it carries. When you send a password over Wi-Fi, or check your bank account, or type a private message, how is that data kept safe from anyone who might be listening? The answer is encryption, which is a very old idea dressed up in modern mathematics. At its simplest, encryption means scrambling data in such a way that only someone with the right key can unscramble it. The data still travels through the air as radio waves, and in theory, anyone nearby with the right equipment could pick up those waves. But without the encryption key, what they would see is meaningless noise, a jumble of numbers and symbols with no discernible pattern, no readable words, no usable information. It would be like intercepting a letter written in a code so complex that the entire letter looks like random ink splatters. The earliest form of Wi-Fi encryption was called WEP, which stood for Wired Equivalent Privacy. The name was aspirational. It aimed to make wireless communication as private as a wired connection, where someone would need physical access to the cable to eavesdrop. WEP was introduced in the late 1990s, when Wi-Fi itself was still a young technology finding its footing. It was better than nothing, certainly, but it had significant weaknesses that became apparent over time. The way it generated its scrambling patterns was not sufficiently random, and it reused certain values in ways that created predictable patterns. Researchers discovered that, with modest equipment and some patience, the patterns could be identified and the key could be deduced. WEP is no longer considered safe, and most modern routers do not even offer it as an option. It has been gently retired, as technologies sometimes are when something better comes along. The replacement for WEP was called WPA, which stood for Wi-Fi Protected Access. WPA used a more robust method for generating its encryption patterns and changed its scrambling key more frequently, which made it substantially harder to crack. WPA was a meaningful improvement, but it was always intended as an interim step, a bridge to something even better. That something was WPA2, which arrived shortly afterward and is still very widely used today. WPA2 uses an encryption algorithm called AES, the Advanced Encryption Standard. AES is not specific to Wi-Fi. It is a general-purpose encryption algorithm used all over the world, by banks, by governments, by hospitals, by anyone who needs to protect sensitive data. It was selected through a rigorous international competition and has been analyzed extensively by cryptographers for over 2 decades. It is strong, it is well understood, and for all practical purposes, it is unbreakable with current technology when used correctly. When your Wi-Fi connection is protected by WPA2, your data is wrapped in the same class of mathematical protection that guards some of the most sensitive information on the planet. If encryption ever sounds intimidating, you can translate it into something quieter. The same message, wrapped in a pattern only the right listener can unwrap. More recently, a newer standard called WPA3 has been introduced. WPA3 includes several refinements. It makes it substantially harder for someone to guess your password by trying many different combinations in rapid succession, a technique known as a brute force attack. It provides better protection even if your password happens to be relatively simple or common. and it includes a feature called forward secrecy, which is a particularly elegant idea. Forward secrecy is designed so that even if someone were to discover your Wi-Fi password at some point in the future, that password would not simply unlock previously captured traffic. Each session negotiates fresh keys, and older sessions are meant to remain separate. Each connection session generates its own unique, temporary encryption key, and once the session ends, that key is discarded forever. In that sense, past conversations are meant to stay closed, even if the password later becomes known. The process of setting up this encryption happens automatically, as part of the initial handshake between your device and the router. When you type in the Wi-Fi password and your device connects, the two are not simply checking the password and letting you in. The process is more elegant than that. Your device and the router use the password as a shared secret, a starting point, and then they each perform the same mathematical operations on it, combined with some random values they exchange during the handshake, to independently derive a shared encryption key. The beauty of this process is that the actual encryption key is never transmitted through the air. It is computed independently on both sides, and if both sides have the correct password and the same random values, they will arrive at the same key. An eavesdropper who captured the entire handshake would still be missing the original password, and without it, the mathematics would lead nowhere useful. This derived key is then used to encrypt every single packet that travels between your device and the router for the duration of the connection. Each packet is individually wrapped, individually sealed. From the outside, the data in those packets looks like random noise, a meaningless string of characters with no discernible structure. From the inside, it is a perfectly clear conversation between two parties who share a secret. For our purposes tonight, you do not need the mathematics. It is enough to know that the conversation is wrapped while it travels through the air and unwrapped only at the ends. It is worth noting that this Wi-Fi encryption protects the data while it is traveling through the air between your device and the router. That is the stretch where the signal is most exposed, floating through the room where anyone might theoretically intercept it. Once the data reaches the router and is sent out over the wired connection to the internet, other forms of encryption may take over. Secure websites, for example, the ones indicated by a small padlock icon in your browser's address bar, use their own encryption to protect data as it travels across the wider internet. These are separate layers of protection, each one guarding a different segment of the journey. But the Wi-Fi encryption, the one we are discussing tonight, specifically guards the wireless link, the short hop through the air from your device to the router. So let us recap this gently. Encryption scrambles your data so that only your device and the router can read it. Early methods like WEP had weaknesses and have been retired. Modern standards like WPA2 and WPA3 are strong and reliable, using well-tested mathematical algorithms to protect every packet. The encryption is set up automatically when you connect, without you needing to do anything beyond entering the password. And it works continuously, protecting every bit of data that passes through the air between your device and the router. It is a quiet shield, invisible, constant, working in the background so you do not have to think about it. The way a good lock on a door works, even when you are sound asleep. Section 6. Why Wi-Fi slows down or drops out. Let us now turn to something that everyone has experienced at one time or another, and that almost no one finds particularly enjoyable.
The moment when your Wi-Fi connection becomes slow, or starts to stutter, or simply stops working for a little while. It is a small frustration, a minor interruption in the flow of the evening, and it has very ordinary, very undramatic explanations. The most common reason Wi-Fi slows down is simple congestion. We touched on this earlier when we talked about channels, but let us revisit it with a bit more detail. If there are many devices all trying to use the same channel, or overlapping channels, in the same area, they have to take turns. The more devices there are, the longer each one has to wait for its turn. It is the same reason a road slows down during rush hour. There is nothing wrong with the road itself. The pavement is fine, the lane markings are clear, the traffic lights are working. There are simply too many cars trying to use the same space at the same time, and the result is that everyone moves a little more slowly. This is especially noticeable in places like apartment buildings or dense neighborhoods, where dozens or even hundreds of routers may be operating within range of one another, all of them broadcasting on the same set of frequencies. Each router is trying to have its own quiet conversation with its own devices, but the electromagnetic neighborhood is crowded, and the signals bleed into one another. Packets get garbled and need to be retransmitted. Devices wait longer between turns. The overall speed drops, not because anything is broken, but because the shared resource is simply being shared by too many users. Distance is another common factor. The farther you move from the router, the weaker the signal becomes. This is a basic property of all radio waves. As they spread out from the transmitter, their energy is distributed over a larger and larger area, and the signal strength at any given point decreases. It is like the ripples from that stone in the pond. Close to where the stone fell, the ripples are strong and clearly defined. Farther away, they become gentle and faint, and eventually indistinguishable from the stillness of the water. At a certain distance from the router, the Wi-Fi signal becomes too weak for reliable communication, and the connection drops or slows to a crawl. Moving closer to the router, or placing the router in a more central location in your home, often makes a noticeable difference. Physical obstacles also play a meaningful role. Walls, floors, ceilings, large pieces of furniture, and especially metal objects, all absorb or reflect some of the radio signal as it passes through. A router placed in the basement will have a much harder time reaching the second floor than one placed on the main level. Thick concrete walls are particularly effective at blocking Wi-Fi signals, while thin wood and drywall panels allow more of the signal to pass through. Water, interestingly, is quite good at absorbing radio waves at Wi-Fi frequencies. This is why a large fish tank or a water heater between you and the router might weaken the signal more than you would expect. And it is part of the reason why your body, which is mostly water, can attenuate the signal slightly if you are standing directly between your device and the router. A small pause. If Wi-Fi feels unpredictable, imagine the signal as a soft light. Distance dims it, and heavy materials can muffle it. Nothing personal, just physics. Then there is the matter of bandwidth sharing within your own home. When multiple devices are all using Wi-Fi at the same time, they are all sharing the same total bandwidth that the router provides. If one device is streaming high-definition video, it is using a large portion of the available capacity, which leaves less for everything else. If several devices are all doing data-heavy tasks simultaneously, the available bandwidth gets divided among them, and each one experiences a slower connection as a result. This is not a flaw in Wi-Fi. It is simply the nature of a shared resource.
Most modern routers handle this sharing reasonably well, allocating time and bandwidth among devices in a fair and orderly way. But there are limits to what can be shared. Interference from other electronic devices can also be a contributing factor, particularly on the 2.4 GHz band. Microwave ovens, for example, operate at a frequency very close to 2.4 GHz, and when they are running, they can produce enough stray radio energy to interfere with Wi-Fi signals on that band. The interference is temporary, lasting only as long as the microwave is in use, but it can be noticeable. Bluetooth devices, cordless phones, and certain baby monitors also use portions of the 2.4 GHz range and can add to the general level of radio noise. Switching to the 5 GHz band, if your devices support it, often helps in these situations, because that band is less crowded by other consumer electronics and less susceptible to these particular sources of interference. Occasionally, the issue is not with the wireless signal at all, but with the internet connection itself. If your internet service provider is experiencing congestion or maintenance or an outage in your area, no amount of strong Wi-Fi signal will help. The data can travel perfectly well between your device and the router, but the router has nowhere to send it beyond that. The bottleneck is not in the air. It is somewhere in the wider network, beyond your control. This is the kind of slowdown that affects all your devices equally, whether they are connected wirelessly or plugged in with a cable. And sometimes, rarely, the router itself simply needs to be restarted. Like any small computer, and that is really what a router is, a small, specialized computer, it runs software. And that software can occasionally get into a confused or degraded state after running continuously for weeks or months on end. Memory can become fragmented. Temporary data tables can grow unwieldy. A restart clears the router's memory, resets all its connections, and often resolves mysterious slowdowns or dropouts. It is the technological equivalent of a good night's sleep, a chance for the system to start fresh. So let us gather all of this together. Wi-Fi slows down or drops out because of congestion on the channel, distance from the router, physical obstacles like walls and furniture, bandwidth sharing among devices, interference from other electronics, issues with the internet service provider, or the occasional need for a simple restart. None of these reasons are dramatic. All of them are manageable. And most of the time, for most people, Wi-Fi works perfectly well, day after day, quietly carrying data without complaint, like a dependable old bridge that you cross every day without ever stopping to admire the engineering. We have come a long way tonight, and the evening is deepening around us. Let us take a gentle moment to breathe and recall where we have been. We began with radio waves, those invisible ripples that carry Wi-Fi signals through the air at the speed of light, silent and everywhere. We met the router and the device, those two small radios exchanging data in a steady, patient conversation. We learned about channels, the organized lanes that keep multiple conversations from colliding. We watched data travel in small, careful packets, each one sent, received, and confirmed. We saw how encryption wraps every packet in a mathematical shield, keeping your information safe. And just now, we looked at the perfectly ordinary reasons why Wi-Fi sometimes falters, and found nothing frightening or mysterious, just simple physics and shared resources. The room is quiet now. Perhaps you can feel the weight of the blanket on your shoulders, or the softness of the pillow beneath your head. The Wi-Fi signals in the air around you are as steady as they have ever been, carrying their tiny parcels of data with infinite patience, asking nothing of you. There are two more short, gentle topics ahead, and then we will bring the evening to a close. Whenever you are ready. or even if you are not quite ready. We will go on together, slowly. Section 7. The Standards. How Wi-Fi has evolved. Wi-Fi has not always been the same. Like most technologies, it has grown gradually, in quiet steps, each one a little faster and a little more capable than the last. Knowing the names and dates of these steps is not essential, and if they begin to blur together, that is entirely normal. But there is a pleasant satisfaction in understanding how something so familiar came to be what it is today. It did not arrive all at once. It was built, layer by layer, improvement by improvement, by thousands of engineers working patiently over many years. And the story of that building is, in its own quiet way, rather nice. The standard that governs Wi-Fi is called IEEE 802.11. IEEE stands for the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, a large professional organization that develops technical standards for an enormous range of technologies. The number 802.11 is simply the designation they assigned to wireless networking. It is not a poetic name, but it has been a dependable one. The original 802.11 standard was published in 1997. It was the result of years of work by committees of engineers who wanted to establish a common set of rules so that wireless networking equipment from different manufacturers could work together. The standard supported data rates of 1 to 2 megabits per second, which, by today's standards, is very slow indeed. You would struggle to load a modern web page at those speeds, let alone stream a video or join a video call. But at the time, the speed was secondary to what it represented. You would struggle to load a modern web page at those speeds, let alone stream a video. But at the time, the speed was secondary. What mattered was the principle. For the first time, a computer could connect to a local network and through it to the internet without any cables at all, just radio waves. The freedom that represented was more important than the numbers on the speed test. In 1999, 2 improved versions arrived. One, called 802.11a, operated in the 5 GHz band and could reach speeds up to 54 megabits per second. The other, called 802.11b, used the 2.4 GHz band and topped out at 11 megabits per second. Despite being slower on paper, 802.11b became the more widely adopted of the two, and the reasons for this are instructive. The 2.4 GHz signals traveled farther, which meant that a single access point could cover a larger area. They passed through walls more easily, which mattered enormously in homes and offices where the router and the device were rarely in the same room. And the hardware required to operate at 2.4 GHz was less expensive to manufacture, which meant that routers and Wi-Fi cards were more affordable for everyday consumers. For most people, in most situations, range and affordability, and the ability to reach the back bedroom through 2 walls, mattered more than the raw speed printed on the box. And so, 802.11b became the version that brought Wi-Fi into the mainstream, quietly and modestly, without much fanfare. In 2003, 802.11g arrived, combining the better range of the 2.4 GHz band with the higher speed of 54 megabits per second that had previously been available only on 5 GHz. It was the best of both worlds, and it became widely popular. Then came 802.11n in 2009, which brought a genuinely significant leap forward. It could operate on both the 2.4 and the 5 GHz bands, giving devices and routers more flexibility. And it introduced a technique called MIMO, which stands for multiple input, multiple output. MIMO uses multiple antennas on both the router and the device to send and receive several independent streams of data simultaneously. Imagine a post office that previously had only one counter and now has 4. Each counter handles its own stream of letters, and the total throughput of the post office increases substantially, even though each individual counter is working at the same pace as before. MIMO brought meaningful improvements in both speed and reliability, and it remains a core feature of Wi-Fi to this day. In 2014, 802.11ac arrived, pushing speeds even higher, primarily in the 5 GHz band. It widened the channels, added more spatial streams, and introduced a technique called beamforming, which allows the router to focus its signal more precisely toward the device it is communicating with, rather than broadcasting in all directions equally. Think of the difference between a lamp that casts light in every direction and a flashlight that aims its beam at a specific spot. Beamforming does something similar with radio waves, concentrating the energy where it is needed most. You can let the letters and numbers blur together. Each update mainly means the same thing: a little faster, a little steadier, and a little better in crowded air. Then came 802.11ax, often marketed as Wi-Fi 6, standardized in the late 2010s and widely adopted around 2019 to 2020. It was perhaps the most thoughtful update of all. Rather than focusing primarily on peak speed, it focused on efficiency. By 2020, the average home had not just 1 or 2 wireless devices, but many. A phone for each family member, a laptop, a tablet, a smart television, a voice assistant, perhaps a doorbell camera or a thermostat, or a robot vacuum cleaner. The challenge was no longer just speed. It was handling many devices at once without any of them feeling neglected. 802.11ax introduced techniques for allowing the router to communicate with multiple devices simultaneously in a more organized way, reducing the amount of time each device spent waiting for its turn. The result was a smoother experience for everyone, even in device-dense homes. Recognizing that names like 802.11ax were not exactly easy for consumers to remember or compare, the Wi-Fi Alliance introduced a simpler naming scheme. 802.11n became Wi-Fi 4. 802.11ac became Wi-Fi 5. 802.11ax became Wi-Fi 6. And the latest version, which adds the 6 GHz band for even more capacity, is called Wi-Fi 6E, with Wi-Fi 7, the next generation, already beginning to appear in newer devices. Each generation has brought more speed, more reliability, and better handling of crowded environments. But the fundamental idea has never changed. It is still radio waves, still packets, still the same polite turn-taking and quiet encryption. The conversation between your router and your device has simply gotten more fluent over the years. The way 2 old friends who have known each other for decades can communicate with remarkable efficiency. A glance, a nod, a half-finished sentence that the other one completes without thinking. So that is the quiet history of Wi-Fi standards. From a single-lane country road to a wide, well-managed highway, all built on the same basic principles of radio communication that we talked about at the very beginning. Nothing sudden, nothing jarring. Just a gentle, steady march forward, one step at a time, year after year. Section 8. Wi-Fi in the wider world. For our final stretch together tonight, let us widen our view just a little and look at where Wi-Fi fits in the broader landscape of wireless communication and at the quiet role it plays in daily life around the world. Wi-Fi is not the only wireless technology you use. Your phone, for instance, also connects to the internet through cellular networks, the ones provided by mobile carriers. Cellular networks use different frequencies, different communication protocols, and very different infrastructure. They are designed to cover vast areas, entire cities and highways and stretches of countryside, using tall transmission towers spaced miles apart. Wi-Fi, by contrast, is designed for much shorter ranges. A single Wi-Fi access point typically covers a building or a portion of a building, perhaps a few hundred feet at most in open air. The two technologies complement each other beautifully. When you are at home, sitting comfortably, your phone uses Wi-Fi. When you step outside and begin walking down the street, it switches seamlessly to the cellular network. And when you arrive at the office or a coffee shop, it connects to Wi-Fi again. This handoff happens automatically, without any conscious effort on your part. You simply move through the world, and your device quietly adjusts. Bluetooth is another wireless technology that lives alongside Wi-Fi. Bluetooth operates in the same 2.4 GHz band, but it serves a very different purpose and uses a very different approach. Where Wi-Fi is designed to move large amounts of data over moderate distances, connecting your device to the full breadth of the internet, Bluetooth is designed for small amounts of data over very short distances, typically just a few meters at most. It is the quiet helper that connects your wireless earbuds to your phone so you can listen to music without a cable. It is what links your keyboard to your computer across the few inches of desk between them. It is what allows your smartwatch to receive notifications from the device in your pocket. Bluetooth uses much less power than Wi-Fi, which is why those small devices with tiny batteries can run for hours or days or even weeks on a single charge. The two technologies coexist peacefully in the same frequency band, like two neighbors who share a garden wall but have very different routines and rarely get in each other's way. There are also newer wireless technologies designed for the growing world of connected objects, sometimes called the Internet of Things. Technologies like Zigbee and Z-Wave are used by smart home devices, small, unobtrusive things like light bulbs that can be dimmed from your phone, door sensors that notice when you have come home, and thermostats that learn your preferred temperature and adjust themselves accordingly. These devices need to send and receive wireless signals, but they do not need anything like the data rates that Wi-Fi provides. A thermostat sending a temperature reading uses a tiny fraction of the bandwidth that a video stream requires. So these devices use specialized protocols that are designed for very small amounts of data, sent very infrequently, while using very little power, so that their batteries can last for months or even years without replacement. Wi-Fi, as efficient as it has become over the years, still draws more power than these specialized low-energy protocols, which is one reason why your smart light bulb might communicate using Zigbee rather than Wi-Fi. Before we widen out further, take a moment to rest. Wi-Fi is only one member of a larger family of wireless signals, each with its own gentle role. But for the core experience of connecting your personal devices to the internet, whether at home, at work, in a library, or at a coffee shop, Wi-Fi remains the standard. It is the quiet backbone of how most people interact with the internet most of the time. Hundreds of millions of routers around the world are operating right now, at this very moment, sending and receiving packets, managing channels, encrypting data, and connecting devices to the wider network. They are doing this in homes and offices and schools and hospitals and hotels, in airports and train stations and shopping centers, in places you have been and places you will never visit. All of them humming along without any fanfare at all. Public Wi-Fi networks, the kind you encounter in airports, hotels and cafes, work on the same underlying principles as your home network, though they are typically configured to handle many more simultaneous users and to provide some degree of separation between those users, so that one person's device cannot easily see another's traffic. Public networks are often slower than home networks, simply because the bandwidth is shared among more people, and the encryption may be configured differently, but the technology is the same. Packets and channels and radio waves, all the way through. Wi-Fi has also found its way into some unexpected places. Commercial aircraft offer Wi-Fi service, connecting passengers to the internet at cruising altitude. The way this works is rather charming in its indirectness. Your device connects to a small Wi-Fi access point inside the cabin, just as it would at home. But the access point in the cabin is not connected to a cable running through the ground. Instead, it is connected to an antenna on the outside of the aircraft, which communicates with either a satellite orbiting high above the Earth or a series of ground-based stations that the plane passes over as it flies. The signal travels from your seat to the cabin's access point, then from the antenna on the plane up to the satellite or down to a ground station, and from there into the terrestrial internet. It is a longer journey than the one from your couch to your living room router, and the connection is usually slower as a result, but the fundamental principles are the same. Packets, radio waves, encryption, quiet acknowledgements. The language does not change just because you happen to be 6 miles above the ground. Trains offer Wi-Fi. Ferries offer Wi-Fi. Some cities have experimented with large-scale municipal Wi-Fi networks, blanketing entire neighborhoods in coverage. The technology is adaptable, and its reach continues to grow, quietly, steadily, without ever drawing attention to itself. Let us take a moment to consider the scale of what we have described tonight. There are billions of Wi-Fi-enabled devices in the world. Every second of every day, an almost unimaginable number of packets are being assembled, encrypted, transmitted as radio waves, received, decrypted, acknowledged, and reassembled into the web pages and messages and songs and videos that people experience as seamless and instantaneous. And all of this happens in the air, invisibly, silently, in every room with a router and a connected device. It is one of the great, quiet achievements of modern engineering. A system so well designed and so thoroughly reliable that it has become part of the background of life, like electricity or running water, noticed only when it is absent. So that is Wi-Fi in the wider world. One wireless technology among many, each suited to its own purpose. But Wi-Fi is the one most people rely on most of the time when they are indoors, settled in, and connected to the things they care about. It is the steady, unassuming companion that brings the internet to your couch, your desk, your kitchen counter, and your bedside table, without a single cable stretching across the floor. And here we are, at the end of our journey together tonight. We have traveled gently through the whole world of Wi-Fi, from the simplest foundations to the widest view, and none of it required any effort at all. We began with radio waves, those invisible ripples in the electromagnetic field, traveling at the speed of light, carrying information through the air without anyone noticing. We met the router and the device, two small radios engaged in a steady, silent conversation. We explored channels, the orderly lanes that keep signals from colliding. We watched data broken into packets, small and careful, each one sent, received, and confirmed. We saw how encryption wraps every packet in mathematics, keeping your information safe from the moment it leaves your device until the moment it reaches the router. We looked at why Wi-Fi sometimes stumbles and found only simple, ordinary reasons. We traced the slow, patient evolution of Wi-Fi standards from the late 1990s to today. And we placed Wi-Fi in the broader world of wireless communication, one gentle technology among many, doing its part. The room is still, the signals are still traveling, and you are still here. Or perhaps you have already begun to drift away. Either way is perfectly fine. There is no wrong place to be right now.
Let us bring this evening to a close now, gently, the way a book closes softly when you have read the last page, and there is nothing left to do but set it down on the nightstand. Wi-Fi is a simple idea at its heart. Radio waves carry information through the air. A router sends, a device receives, and then the device sends back. The signals travel in channels, organized and polite. The data moves in packets, small and orderly, each one confirmed before the next one follows. Encryption keeps everything safe, quietly and constantly. And the standards that govern it all have evolved slowly, steadily, over nearly 3 decades, always building on the same calm, reliable foundation of radio communication. You use Wi-Fi every day. You rely on it without thinking about it, the way you rely on the floor beneath your feet or the air you breathe. It is one of those systems that is designed, quite deliberately, to be invisible, to work so well that you forget it exists entirely. And that, perhaps, is the highest compliment you can pay to any piece of technology. Not that it is exciting, not that it is remarkable, not that it changes the world in some loud, dramatic fashion, but that it works, quietly and constantly, and that you never need to give it a second thought. If you think about it, which you need not do right now, there is something profoundly peaceful about the way Wi-Fi operates. It does not demand your attention. It does not interrupt your evening. It does not ask you to understand it or appreciate it, or even acknowledge its existence. It simply works, in the background, in the quiet spaces between you and the router, carrying the things you care about from one place to another, through nothing more than carefully arranged ripples in the electromagnetic field. It is engineering in service of invisibility, and there is a quiet beauty in that. The radio waves in your room are still traveling right now, carrying their tiny parcels of data through the air, and they will continue to do so long after you have closed your eyes. They ask nothing of you. They expect nothing of you. They are simply there, part of the quiet machinery of the modern world, humming along at the speed of light, steady and faithful, and utterly unconcerned with being noticed. Thank you for spending this time here tonight. There is nothing more you need to do, nothing more you need to think about, nothing more you need to remember. The world of Wi-Fi will carry on, patiently and faithfully, whether you think about it or not. That is, after all, what it was designed to do. Just rest now.
Let the quiet signals carry on without you. Let the packets travel their little journeys through the air. Let the router blink its small, steady lights in the other room. Everything is working. Everything is fine. Everything is exactly as it should be. Good night.